Hello and welcome. My name is Brian Kaplan. I'm editor of The Banker magazine, and I'm here today to talk about the latest edition of our management guide called How to Run a Bank. Now, there's a rather interesting story behind how we came to produce this guidebook. About 5 years ago on The Banker, we had a cover story about the management trends and things in the market that were exercising senior executives in the banks. So when we brought out this story, we designed a cover, and the artist drew a picture of a textbook, and he wrote on it how to run a bank. When the magazine was distributed to our readers around the world, we got some phone calls and emails from people saying they'd like to get hold of a copy of How to Run a Bank. The only problem was we didn't have a textbook. So we decided that there was obviously a demand in the market to produce this kind of book with expert opinion and chief executive commentary on the trends in managing a bank. Now in 2011, we're actually producing our third edition of How to Run a Bank. And as in the previous editions, we've managed to get input from some very high-level people in the banking industry, as well as a range of experts. The introduction, for example, is written by HortaOsorio. He's the chief executive of Lloyds Bank in the UK. Antonio is the guy who turned around Santander's UK operations, and at the Banker we gave him 2 awards for doing this. He's then been picked by the UK government to turn around Lloyds, which, if you remember, is one of the banks that had to be rescued during the crisis. Antonio's article is about going back to the basics of banking and asking what should banks really be doing. Sometimes in an industry, I think it's useful to have that kind of nuts and bolts conversation. What is a bank really for? Is it really serving the purpose it was set up for? We then have Vikram Pandit. He's the chief executive of Citigroup. He's writing about financial inclusion. One of the things that's very much on the minds of governments at the moment is that the banking sector should spread out beyond the middle class and its more normal captive audience to include everybody in the banking system. And in this article, Vikram talks about financial inclusion and Citigroup's strategy for including everybody into the banking system. We then have Brian Moynihan. He's the chief executive of Bank of America, and he's making a case for universal banking. And he talks about how retail banking activities, investment banking, and corporate banking all complement each other, and why there are big synergies between the businesses. It's obviously a very relevant conversation to have at the moment, when in both the United States and in Europe, there's a debate amongst governments and amongst regulators as to whether it would be a safer banking system if we split these kinds of activities up. Finally, in our opening section, we have Guo Shuang. He's the chairman of China Construction Bank, and he's talking about the development and reforms that are taking place in the Chinese banking sector. And he talks very openly about some of the problems faced by China at the moment, including social inequality and pollution, and the need to get to the next step of development, and how the banking system can help resolving some of those kinds of social problems. So these are some of the big picture items that we have in How to Run a Bank. We have a huge amount looking at operational issues such as risk management, regulation, and quite detailed studies on things like liquidity management and collateral management. But as well as the operational issues, we haven't forgotten that we need to talk about business opportunities and how banks are going to make profits in the future and how they're going to deal with the new technology environment. We have a chapter on navigating in a digital world. And we have Jim Davis, who's the Senior Vice President for SaaS, talking about how banks should use multi-channel formats in order to maximize their customer opportunity. We have an article contributed by the partners of Bearing Point looking at social media and the impact that forums such as Facebook and Twitter are having on the banking industry. We've got a big article on branding. This is written by David Haig. He's the Chief Executive of Brand Finance. And this is the company that helps the Banker put together our top 500 ranking of banking brands that we do every February. And David talks about the branding challenge that banks are now facing. Islamic banking is another area where bankers see huge opportunities. Joe Devana, who's the Chief Executive of Maris Strategies, is also a contributor to How to Run a Bank. And he's also the guy who helps the Banker put together our top 500 Islamic ranking. So we've got some key figures there talking about branding and Islamic banking. If you want to have a look and see all the articles and chapters that are contained in How to Run a Bank 2011, click on the appropriate area on this website, and we hope to invite you as a reader and a subscriber to How to Run a Bank 2011.